A few months ago over on my Discord, I asked my viewers to give me their very best Pokemon theories, which is far easier said than done, because there's this one person, for example, who literally just sent me this with a thumbs up emoji. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? I don't know. Those ones aside, there were some really good ones among the batches as well. We'll start with this one by Burn, and it revolves around an old but also new trio of Pokemon. When we look at the legendary birds of Kanto, we see Pokemon that have developed a perfect symbiotic relationship with nature. Their very biology is adapted entirely around the seasonal cycle. Articuno's wings chill the moisture in the air, bringing the winter snow. Moltres' intense heat melts those very same mountainsides, heralding the arrival of spring. And Zapdos commands the violent thunderstorms of the summer. They are the living gears that turn the seasons. But if we travel to Galar, we find ancient carvings in the Crown Tundra that depict bird shapes with much more simplistic, natural features, which likely means that the birds we find over in Kanto and the ones we find here in Galar come from a single ancestor, a proto-bird of sorts. So why do the birds we find here today look so drastically different? Well, one of my viewers, Burn, suggests that the Galarian birds are not mere regional variants, but instead permanent mutations caused by Eternatus' unstable energy that was violently released all over Galar more than 3,000 years ago. To prove this, I'd like you to first look at the colors of the Galarian birds. We see purples, dark reds, blacks, and even oranges. Not only are these colors much darker than the ones we see on the Cantonian ones, but they're also the exact same ones we see radiating from Eternatus' Dynamax energy. But that's not all. Their new typings also align with the specific corruptions caused by this energy. Articuno's psychic typing reflects the distortions that Dynamaxing creates. While Burn didn't state this, I'd like to add on to that with the fact that some of the developers who worked on Sword and Shield actually revealed that the giant Dynamax form of these Pokemon are actually just holographic projections they cast outward, which is pretty similar to a Psychic's power, no? Zapdos' new fighting typing reflects the physical part of the process. It represents the muscle mutation and the amount of strength that is even required to go through the process. Then finally, we have the easiest one to explain. Moltres' dark typing is due to Eternatus' corrupted and life-draining energy. Now, here's something I want to add to Burn's theory. It feels as though the Galarian birds are the exact opposites of their Kanto counterparts. Take a look at the Cantonian Zapdos. It lives high up in the thunderclouds, charging itself with atmospheric electricity. But Galarian Zapdos can't do any of this. It completely lost its ability to fly. This version also no longer has access to its skybound habitat, grounded by its overgrown leg muscles. Then we also have Articuno, whose Cantonian form is known to flap its wings in order to bring the chilling winds of winter. Galarian Articuno, though, no longer has any feathers at all. The ones we see aren't actually real. They're composed entirely of psychic energy, which means its movements no longer bring the winter chill. It has been entirely severed from the seasonal cycle, a trademark of these birds. Finally, we have Moltres, whose Cantonian form is heavily documented in Pokédex entries as a savior. It appears to rescue people lost on mountainsides. Galarian Moltres, though, is a direct inversion of this. Using its malicious aura, it's said to consume the spirits, the life force of other Pokémon. It went from protecting life to taking it. All in all, I really like this interpretation of the regional variants. It goes against the common argument of them just being very similar to the ones we know and not actually being related to them at all. So kudos to you, Burn. Very well researched. While we're still on the topic of the birds and such, there's one more theory on them by Lily that would be a shame not to discuss. Earlier I mentioned that the Cantonian birds were the living gears that turn the seasons. But Lily pointed out a massive flaw in that logic. Where is autumn? Why do these birds only represent winter, spring, and summer? And due to this discrepancy, Lily suggests that the Cantonian Pokédex entries aren't exactly facts, but more like the remnants of an ancient culture. Especially when we know that the forces of nature like Enamorus are the true season bringers of the Pokemon world. It could very well be that the early humans in Kanto originally worshipped just two gods of the seasons. Articuno, who literally is just named Freezer in Japanese, brought the winter snow, and then Moltres, which is fire, thawed the ice to bring the spring. It was only later that a third bird, Zapdos, aka Thunder, was discovered. Because Japan, the real-world inspiration for Kanto, experiences intense late summer typhoons buffoons, the ancient people incorporated Zapdos into their religion as a storm god to explain the violent summer weather. Then, over thousands of years, active worship faded, but those religious myths survived, eventually being recorded as literal fact by modern Pokemon researchers. Now, I want to add my own thoughts here to answer the biggest question this raises. Where is autumn? If Kanto's ancient people worshipped winter, spring, and summer, why skip the fall? Well, I believe the answer to that lies across the border to Johto. We know that these two regions share a deep history, and what legendary Pokemon is draped in orange and gold, roosts in a tower perpetually surrounded by red falling leaves, and also represents the cycle of life and death? Ho-oh. But again, that's just some food for thought. As always, feel free to add your own opinions to it in the comments below. And, you know, while you're down there, liking the video and subscribing to the channel would also be very, very appreciated. This next theory was written by Moon Vixen, and it revolves around Volo. And who doesn't love a good Volo theory? There's something curious about the man, more than just his connection to Arceus. What do I mean by that? Well, let's look at just how ancestry works in the Pokemon universe. Game Freak usually gives us only about 1 to 3 specific things that tie an ancestor to their modern-day descendant. Colza is a farmer whose hair matches Gardenia's, connecting their affinity for grass types and nature in general. Rai's hair and Lucario matches Riley's, and also possibly implies that the one Riley uses and the egg he gifts to the player are in fact related to Rai's. Professor Laventon's speech and Poke English script on his whiteboard, his general appearance and then also his cross-armed stance tie him to Hops and Leon's family. There is also the fact that in Hop's room there is a Hisuian-style Krogan statue. So, you know, Cylene's hair, lack of eyebrows, and militaristic attitude are an obvious match to Cyrus, but she also specifically states that she would pass down the knowledge of the Galaxy team and their logo to her family, which, well, Cyrus then repurposed into Team Galactic. Now, in Scarlet and Violet, we can also add Perrin. Her hair, her Leafeon, her interest in photography, her desire to capture moments in time, as well as her access to a Hisuian Growlithe line up with Adamant's many traits. So, with all of that in mind, let's look back at Kogita, Volo, and Cynthia. Kogita has Cynthia's hair, her clothing style, and she also lives in the exact place that will eventually become Celestic Town. Kogita perfectly matches the established rule of 3 for ancestral evidence. She is the true genetic link. But then we have Volo, and Volo just completely breaks that. He has the same blonde hair, he has her title as a historical researcher, he shares her obsession with ancient lore, he has her exact battle theme, and he even has her entire team, down to always leading with Spiritomb. Oh, and not to mention, in Pokemon Masters, Cynthia literally forms a sync pair with Giratina, kind of like Volo does. If Game Freak just wanted to communicate that Volo had a blood connection to Cynthia, they didn't need to give us 8 different massive connections. It's a complete overkill. In fact, his official pre-release art alone made everyone immediately think of Cynthia. So they didn't need to make it this obvious, unless they were trying to tell us something different. That Volo isn't just another ancestor, but instead something more direct. Moon Vixen believes that Cynthia is Volo reincarnated. Think of Volo's last words to us. "Someday I'll solve every riddle, and on that day I'll stand before Arceus at last. No, I will conquer it, no matter how many years, decades, or centuries it takes me." Perhaps in the years, decades, and centuries following his defeat, Volo watched the world change. Having been bested by Arceus' chosen trainer, perhaps he finally saw how his ideals failed him, and as he neared the end of his unusually long life, he let go of his desire for power and revenge. And perhaps this is also what earned him a second chance. Arceus allowed Volo's soul to be reborn as Cynthia. He was given a return to his beloved people and ancestral lands, but without the pain that it once held. He was born into a loving childhood, keeping that same intense drive and passion for history, but this time fostering a love for the world instead of a need to rewrite it, which, all in all, just makes Cynthia's story beats in Pokemon Platinum so much more impactful. When Cyrus tries to destroy the universe, Cynthia is the one who actively jumps into the Distortion world with us to face Giratina. She stands in the exact same spot where Volo once stood, watching Cyrus try to commit the exact same sins her past self did. Now, I want to add my own thoughts to Moon Vixen's already incredible theory, because if Cynthia truly is Volo reincarnated, it adds a massive layer of depth to a completely different game. Heart Gold and Soul Silver. If you bring an event Arceus to the ruins of Alpha in those games, you're transported to the Sinnoh ruins, a place built by a mix of the Sinnoh and Jotonian cultures. And who is waiting there? Cynthia. Remember what Volo's ultimate goal was? He wanted to stand before the creator, Arceus, and witness its power of creation firsthand so that he could control it, but he failed. In Heart Gold and Soul Silver, however, when you step onto the mystery stage with Cynthia, Arceus descends, and right there, before her very eyes, Arceus uses its powers to both show us the truth of the universe, which apparently is a handful of stock images, but you know, like, let's not go too far into that. And of course an egg for either Dialga, Palkia, or Giratina. If Cynthia is Volo, then in that moment she finally got exactly what her past self spent centuries obsessing over. She got to stand before Arceus and witness the raw power of creation. But because her soul had been reborn and nurtured with love, she didn't try to conquer it. She simply watched in awe and reverence. Honestly, Moonvixen, this might be my new favorite piece of headcanon for the Sinnohan games. Sure, it does go against a few of my own theories, but in the end, everything is a theory. It does also kind of remind me of another theory that we shortly discussed in the previous video. If you know, you know. Anyways, on to the next one. We are heading over to the Hoenn region for our next theory. This one is brought to us by Gothic Dreamings. What if Primal Reversion and Mega Evolution are actually the exact same phenomenon? At first glance, the games treat them as two different mechanics, but Gothic does point out some massive similarities. First off, mechanically speaking, both transformations give the Pokemon an identical base stat total increase of exactly 100 points. But they do have a few differences. Primal Reversion doesn't drain your Mega Evolution power limit in battle, which we do see happen in Legends ZA. Also, a primal Pokemon stays in its primal form even after fainting, unlike a Mega Evolution, which would just revert back. Finally, Mega Evolution requires a Keystone and a Trainer's Bond, whereas Primal Reversion just uses pure and natural energy. So how can they be the same thing if they act differently? Well, Gothic brings up a brilliant point about the items that are used to trigger them. The blue and red orbs are noticeably larger than your standard Mega Stones, roughly 4 times larger in fact. Because these orbs contain so much concentrated raw power, Kyogre and Groudon don't need to draw on a trainer's energy through a Keystone to transform. That massive surplus of energy is also why they can possibly maintain their forms even after fainting. On top of that, there is a visual similarity between Primal Kyogre, Primal Groudon, and, well, Mega Rayquaza. They all share this exact same golden, glowing energy radiating from them. But that's not all the proof Gothic gave us. Take a look at the events of Pokemon Legends ZA. In the game, a rogue Primal Kyogre and rogue Primal Groudon manifest in hyperspace Lumios, but they aren't triggered by Hoenn's natural energy, nor through the power of the 2 orbs. Instead, they are brought out by Darkrai's nightmare power, being directly enhanced by the Mega Power leaking from Ange at Prism Tower. The fact that raw Mega Power can successfully trigger a Primal Reversion would likely indicate that they are drawing from the exact same power source. To back this up visually, Gothic brings our attention to what they call the Primal Megas of Hoenn. These are 3 specific Mega Evolutions whose typings perfectly mirror the Weather Trio, and most importantly, their designs heavily imply that Mega Evolution is also tapping into something ancient and primal. Exhibit A is Mega Sharpedo, mirroring Kyogre. Upon Mega evolving, it gains these scar-like markings, uneven teeth, and sharp spikes jutting right out of its snout. To put it simply, its new form looks like a prehistoric predator. Exhibit B is Mega Camerupt, mirroring Groudon. When it Mega evolves, its 2 stony humps converge into one massive volcano. The base darkens as if it's been blackened by soot, and the hump literally overflows with magma. It seems like the Mega Evolution process has forcefully pulled Camerupt's raw connection to the natural elements right to the forefront. And finally, Exhibit C is Mega Salamence, mirroring Rayquaza. When Salamence Mega evolves, its jaw sharpens dramatically, giving it a striking and very suspicious similarity to Rayquaza's base form. Honestly, Kothic, that's some really good evidence. I think you've gathered enough for a whole video, which is insane. But since you didn't mention anything about the history of the two phenomena, I'll do so now. Historically, primal reversion came first. During Hoenn's ancient age, this phenomenon wasn't the temporary transformation it is today, because back then, the world was overflowing with raw, natural energy. Primal reversion was just the natural state of things. Groudon and Kyogre constantly absorbed this energy to maintain their primal forms, clashing repeatedly and nearly destroying the world in the process. Mega Evolution, on the other hand, was born as a direct countermeasure to this chaos. According to the ancient Draconid people, exactly 1,000 years ago, a giant meteoroid struck the Earth. While Groudon and Kyogre fought over the erupting energy, humanity stood upon this meteor and prayed for their salvation. With the meteoroid acting as the very first keystone, and Rayquaza's built-in Mikaido organ acting as the Megastone, it allowed Rayquaza to achieve the world's first ever Mega Evolution in order to strike the Primal Titans down. Which brings me to the point I'm trying to make here. We know that Rayquaza needs to be stronger than both Groudon and Kyogre in order to keep balance. And as we also now know from the little history section I just told you about, Rayquaza needed to Mega Evolve in order to beat the two Primals. But that's strange, because it used to be able to do so in the past without the needed assistance from the Draconids. So why can't it do so now? Well, maybe it's because it used to be able to perform its Mega Evolution through the raw primal energy that Kyogre and Groudon both use. And here is why I think that. If you bring both Kyogre and Groudon to Professor Oak in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, he gives you an item called the Jade Orb. This Jade Orb is said to have a deep connection to a legend of the Hoenn region, which obviously just refers to Rayquaza. So in the end, that means that just like the other two, Rayquaza could have possibly used this orb in the past to boost its own power level. Perhaps it looked different as Primal Rayquaza, or maybe it even looked the same. Either way, Kothic, fantastic theory and really well thought out. Thank you for allowing me to share it. Let's head back to the Sinnoh region. For the longest time, one thing has always been universally agreed on. If Dialga is time and Palkia is space, then Giratina must represent antimatter. But our next theorist, Imperator Rex, suggests otherwise. They state that Giratina doesn't control antimatter at all, but rather it's the embodiment of dark matter as well as dark energy. As we have discussed on the channel before, Giratina doesn't actually behave like the embodiment of antimatter. Real-world antimatter violently annihilates regular matter upon contact. If Giratina were truly antimatter, just stepping into the Sinnoh region would cause a catastrophic explosion that would wipe out the planet. Instead, everything about Giratina revolves around a completely different theme: shadows. It's described as a Pokemon that exists only as a shadow, and its signature move is, of course, Shadow Force. So where do dark matter and dark energy fit in here? Well, in real-world astrophysics, dark matter and dark energy are completely invisible to the electromagnetic spectrum. We can't actually see them. The only way scientists even know they exist is by observing their gravitational pull on regular, visible matter. They actually make up the vast majority of our universe too, acting as the invisible glue holding galaxies together, and it's also the driving force behind the universe's expansion. Even more mind-blowing, real-world physicists have theorized the existence of something called a hidden valley. And no, it's not the ranch dressing. In quantum physics, a hidden valley is a theoretical parallel world where dark matter exists entirely separate from our own, governed by its own bizarre rules. Sound familiar? That is quite literally the Distortion world. It's a hidden, parallel dimension separated from our own, acting as the invisible support system for the Pokemon universe. And we see these parallels reflected in both the anime as well as the games. In the movie, Giratina and the Sky Warrior, we learn that the Distortion world literally absorbs the damage and toxic pollution caused by Dialga and Palkia clashing in the real world. Without Giratina acting as that invisible glue, the world would likely fall apart due to the destruction these two cause. But that's not all. Take a look at how dark matter interacts with our world. It does so purely through gravitational force. And the Distortion world? Well, it's a place where gravity constantly shifts and warps itself. Even when Giratina rises out of the ground to cross into our world in Pokemon Platinum, the pillars around the rift bend inwards, which Rex brilliantly pointed out to look exactly like a space space-time curvature diagram, a scientific model used to illustrate gravity. The final piece of evidence Rex has for us is simple, but it's pretty concrete as well. If we use synonyms for the words that make up Giratina's signature move, Shadow Force, we can also get Dark Energy. Now then, as always, I'ma jump in here and add my own thoughts to Rex's already very well-researched theory. Consider a circle, this one being time. Then consider another circle, this one being space. The overlapping area between these two circles is reality, where we exist. It's what the combined prowess of Dialga and Palkia's powers could create after Arceus told them to create the Pokemon world. Everything that lies outside these two circles would thus be under the control of Giratina. It doesn't follow the rules, and it also doesn't follow the logic of reality. Giratina represents everything that doesn't exist. It represents nothingness. It represents something that isn't there, yet is always there. Kind of like dark matter.